Hi and welcome! Line slicing is a technique predominantly used for UI graphics, which enables them to expand and contract in accordance to the space they need to fill. A good example for this is a text box for a dialog, or a background of a menu with some kind of layout element attached to it. So by the end of this short tutorial, you will know what line slicing is and how it works, how to set it up for your own elements, and a small bonus, how to make sure your pixel art UI is scaled and displayed correctly. So normally when you scale an image, the whole thing stretches. That's fine if you are only ever working with simple squares and rectangles, but games tend to use much more interesting shapes for windows, buttons or frames. Line slicing solves this stretching issue by dividing a sprite into 9 parts: 4 corners, 4 edges, and a center. Depending on how you set up your image component, edges can be repeated or stretched, while corners always stay unchanged. Let's walk through how to make it work. Go to the import settings of your sprite. Your texture type might come up as default, which is not helping at all. Click on the drop-down and pick Sprite, 2D and UI to turn it into a workable sprite. The first box you might have to change is pixels per unit. This is especially important when you are working with a pixel-perfect UI like for pixel art games. If you do, set this to your original size of the sprite. For example, 16 for pixel art created on a 16 by 16 canvas. If you're working on a regular UI instead, keeping this at 100 might already be good enough. I hardly ever need to change this value. Next, open the sprite editor. If your graphic looks a bit blurry here, don't worry. That's just because the preview is zoomed in to fill the size of the preview area. And if you see a transparent row of pixels to any edge that shouldn't be there and exported your graphics from Illustrator, I'll have a bonus tip at the end for you. In this box on the bottom right, you can define the borders of the sprite, or more specifically, the distance from the outer edge of the image, which should be considered a border for your graphic. You can see them as thin green lines once you enter some values in there. Which values you pick is up to your graphic, and for symmetrical graphics I'd recommend the largest element on your border as your point of reference for this. Your border should be wide enough to encompass important elements. This preview also shows you the 9 slices your image will be sliced into: the corners, the edges and the middle. Keep in mind that you don't have to enter the same values into this box for every side. This really depends on the graphic you choose to work with. Once you are done, click on Apply in the top right corner and close the window. If you are working with pixel art, you will most likely also want to change the filter mode from bilinear to point, no filter. If you keep it at bilinear, your graphic might come out blurry. That's all we need to set up in the importer. If you're working with pixel art, head over to your canvas and specifically the canvas scaler component. Enter the same value here as you did before in the pixels per unit section to keep the visuals coherent. Then, and this is for everybody again, drag your graphic into the source image field for an image component. By default, if you change the size, the graphic will stretch and compress with it. Head to the image type dropdown. You get 2 options to fix this, each depending on your use case. The first is sliced, which will keep the corners fixed and size independent inside your image, but will stretch the edges to fill the space. If your graphic has very simple edges, this might look alright already. But my preferred setting, however, is tiled. This will keep the original edges length and will just fill up the space between corners with repetitions instead of stretching them. However, which one best fits your needs will always depend on the graphic you are working with. A useful feature is the fill center checkmark. No matter which option you choose, your center will always stretch, which is not always what we need. If toggled off, the center is not being displayed. This is great for when you want to use different border styles for your boxes or want to switch out the background. For example here, I have a sprite that is basically all decorative border, with everything else being transparent. And if you found this tutorial to be helpful already, please give it a like and consider subscribing if you haven't already. I focus on making tutorials all about UI. I'll create a container which I will use as the background for other elements going forward, just as I explained in my in-depth walkthrough on the layout group and layout system in this video. The container gets 2 image child elements. Both need to size themselves based on the size of the container, so click on the anchoring menu, hold Shift and Alt, and pick the bottom right one. I'm going into more detail on the anchoring system in this tutorial if you want to learn more. Rename the two objects to border and fill. The border image gets the chosen border as its source and its mode being set to tiled, while I'm going to keep the background image as it currently is. If I resize the container, the images will fill the space, and the background and borders can now be switched out easily. And lastly, a tip for my fellow Illustrator users. When you create a design, export it, and it comes up with an edit pixel to any direction, you ran into some rounding float shenanigans. To make sure those don't happen, position your design at 0 on X and 0 on Y in your document. Any full number should work as well, but I came to learn that 00 works the most reliably. If you export it from here, your design will come up with the appropriate size. Hope you enjoyed the tutorial. If you did, please click like and subscribe if you want to learn more about working with Unity's UI system. Have a great week!